All right, thank you, Todd. So thank you for everyone to take the time to listen to my presentation titled The Essential Analog Common Operational Picture. My name is Maggie Troxel, and I'm currently pursuing my MGIS at Penn State, and my advisor is Dr. Todd Backestow. As Dr. Backestow said, I've spent most of my life in Europe and commissioned in the Army in 2013 as an intel officer, serving mostly in infantry and airborne units. So the digital and analog balance on the battlefield is crucial. Strategic reliance on digital mapping technologies to provide data for and present a common operational picture is particularly important in the talk, but might not survive the first shot of the next war. Naval War College professor Jacqueline Schneider has termed this the capability vulnerability paradox, which states that greater reliance on computerization yields deeper susceptibility to hostile disruption. Automation, despite all of its benefits, has diminished the operator's ability to perform analog functions. This deterioration in manual skills in turn has strategic repercussions. The term analog in this presentation will refer to methods which do not require any sort of power or network connectivity. In layman's terms, a map, a marker, and acetate. There are a few more key terms we must establish. The first key term to discuss is the command post. You might think of the command post as the hub of any particular mission or operation. There are various echelons of command posts as well as different types. However, there are 6 functions which they all have in common according to Army Training Publication 6-05. All of these functions are enabled by everyone having a shared understanding of the situation, which is facilitated by the common operational picture. Doctrinal definitions of a COP are very vague to enable commanders to customize it as they see fit. However, the purpose remains the same. Establish a shared understanding within and across commands in order to facilitate rapid and informed decisions. In order to meet that purpose, a COP will typically have most, if not all, of the following components, which are all layered upon a common base map. Friendly and enemy information, such as current locations and missions, resources available, such as logistics or specialty assets, environmental conditions, such as terrain and weather, and critical information requirements, which alert the commander to make a decision. As depicted here, a COP can be in both digital and analog forms. However, as we will discuss later, the analog COP tends to take a backseat more often than not. This is likely due to the Army's, the DoD as a whole, and the world for that matter's focus on digital systems. In fiscal year 19, the DoD had a budget of over $46 billion for information technology, which supported forces being equipped with 10,000 different operational systems and hundreds of thousands of commercial mobile devices. This digital focus has led us to be extremely dependent on digital devices. In fact, according to Coffey et al., a single brigade combat team has over 2,500 space-enabled program of record items on their modified table of equipment. This dependency, although necessary to continue to be competitive in the digital age, has also created a vulnerability. For anyone in the audience that has spent any amount of time in a tactical command post in an austere environment, we all know that at any moment, the screens and all of their fancy digital accessories could go black. There may not be any immediate indications of why or for how long, but all you know at that point is that the mission must continue. So once the shock wears off, you turn to your analog products and hope that they are updated. Now, for the sake of argument, I will briefly cover 4 main reasons our digital systems may fail. The first reason could be hostile interference. As mentioned, we, along with the rest of the world, rely heavily on technology and dominance of the electromagnetic spectrum. Any adversary in the event of conflict will also desire dominance of the electromagnetic spectrum and will likely try to deny anyone else's access to it. In the diagram below from an article written in the Joint Air Power Competence Center Journal, every red electromagnetic emission represents possible interference with a signal. Sometimes, however, adversaries don't even need to intervene to degrade the use of the electromagnetic spectrum. Sometimes environmental conditions alone can have just as much of an impact. In this basic depiction of weather effects on space-enabled assets from UC Berkeley, we can see how it's not only terrestrial weather that must be taken into account, but also space weather. Space weather, such as solar storms and ionospheric currents, can degrade signals traveling up to space or back down to Earth, causing disturbances in network connectivity and loss of digital systems. As if these outside forces did not pose enough of a threat to digital systems, the next two reasons are more closely related to the systems themselves. Every piece of digital equipment requires some sort of power source, which can only be generated through a limited number of means, typically batteries or generators. According to this presentation given by the project manager Mobile Electric Power in 2009, generators are the largest consumer of fuel during wartime with an average of 357 million gallons per year. Now, it must be put in perspective that in 2009, we had larger footprints in the Middle East. However, in the event of a future conflict in an austere environment with even more digital systems today, fuel availability could be decisive in how we fight. The final reason, and maybe one we are all familiar with, is the fact that digital systems are just plain complicated and cumbersome. This image from the Modern War Institute shows the Army Mission Command systems as of 2019. As you can see, there are 8 systems which are supposed to network together to help form the single common operational picture. Each one of these systems, as well as the server stack, requires several boxes to transport, power to plug into, space to set up, and network connectivity to function, not to mention a knowledgeable user to actually operate the system. And this is all just within an Army command post. I will leave it up to you to imagine the complications when a sister service or a multinational partner joins the fight. The bottom line is any one of these 4 issues can arise at any moment, and we must be prepared to fight without our digital systems. Now, don't get me wrong, the Army and the DoD are aware of all of these possibilities and likely many more, and continuously remind units to exercise analog capabilities. However, there is several years worth of evidence suggesting we have yet to crack the code on proper analog COP employment. Here are several examples of analog COPs from different units conducting a similar mission. As you can see, these have similarities as discussed previously, with the base map serving as the geographic information and the various peripherals. However, it is also plain to see the significant differences, whether it's in size, construction materials, or mounting mechanisms. Additionally, in the bottom right corner are some examples of commercially available analog COP boards. These have clearly tried to fill the requirement, but are still not meeting the mark for one reason or another. If we apply a similar focus to the design of an analog COP that we do to our digital systems, I think we can solve at least this part of the problem. The human-centered design process, as described by IDEO.org, consists of 3 phases: inspiration, ideation, and implementation. This process was developed in support of IDEO's mission to design a more just and inclusive world, which involves working with people mostly in Africa and the United States. Human-centered design has become a mindset of putting the user's needs at the forefront. Similarly, design thinking, made popular by Stanford University, also takes the end user strongly into consideration by starting the design process with empathizing. Once that phase is complete, we can define the problem, ideate a solution, develop a prototype, and test the prototype, which begins the cycle again until the problem is resolved. In 2018, the Moving World Institute, which is a social purpose corporation, wrote a blog post blending the 2 methods together. Both of these together create a structured way forward which helps designers execute the steps of design thinking with a human-centered design mindset to ultimately create a positive long-term impact for the users of the solution. The blend of these 2 methods is what I will use to ultimately develop a prototype for an ideal analog COP that will potentially save hundreds of units valuable design time when preparing for a mission and ultimately help them better maintain situational understanding if and when disaster strikes. There are two categories of change which need to take place: design and doctrine. I anticipate the design requirements for an ideal analog COP will be as follows. It will be portable and expeditionary. It can fit into a tough box without too much dismantling. Scalable to fit in areas as small as the back of a Humvee or as large as the command post tent. Able to withstand the elements. Intuitive, won't require formalized training. Clear displays, customizable depending on the commander's mission. Easy to update, easy transition back to digital if able, and easily transfer between layers to facilitate updates from all relevant staff sections. Additionally, I anticipate implementing this product will require a doctrinal component, much like a digital system would come with a user manual. The doctrinal component will look at mostly refining specifics for the analog COP. Specifically, we will need to codify the role of updating the COP and assign responsibility. Additionally, we will need to establish the clear purpose of the analog COP. As of right now, the analog COP is talked about in doctrine with the most detail appearing in Army Doctrine Publication 6-0. However, a lot of the specifics are left up to Unit Standard Operating Procedures, or SOPs. I would argue that based on years of evidence that units have been failing in this particular area, it is time the Army standardizes this process, if nothing else, than to give units something upon which to build or improve. Here are my sources that I used. And pending any questions or comments, that concludes my presentation.